Hey guys, David from Waxwings Photo. Got something a bit different for you today. We're going to take some photos of the Milky Way and I'm going to show you how to do it. Right, let's go. So we're here at Mount Edelong Lookout, or walking up to it anyway, because I figure this is probably a good place to do some astro work, and I got some feedback from you guys that you'd like to know kind of how I do it. We're going to start today or tonight with some really basic stuff. We'll go through basic gear, basic how to take the shot, and then talk a little bit about how you prepare for it as well. Once we've got the shots, I think we'll do a part 2 where we edit it in Lightroom, because that's actually really important too. But first things first, let's get up to the lookout, see what we can see, and take it from there. Before we talk gear, let's talk about what we're actually going to take a photo of. We're going to take a photo of the Milky Way. Milky Way is a bunch of stars in the sky. Now, the stars are actually pretty faint. When you compare them to the sun or even the moon, it's really hard to see them. So you need to prepare. You need to make sure that you remove as much unnecessary light as possible. So obviously that means no sun in the sky, and as I mentioned, the moon, you want that out of the sky as well. The moon, it may not seem very bright, but it will actually wash out almost all stars and definitely make the Milky Way very hard to see, let alone photograph. There's also the problem of light pollution. Light pollution is light that gets cast up from artificial things, city lights, cars, that sort of thing, and they also make it very difficult to see the stars. So you need to get out. You don't have to go too far away. I'm not that far away from Sydney City. We'll probably see some light pollution on the horizon tonight from that, but we're out of the way. The other thing is you want to maximize the amount of sky in your photo. So you'll probably want a nice wide lens for that. Back to maximizing the light on your sensor, you're going to want a couple of things. First of all, the fastest lens that you can get. And by that I mean the widest aperture, the smallest number in fact. Normally people shoot with like an f2.8 or an f1.8. Not necessary, but it makes life easier. The other way of maximizing the amount of light that reaches your sensor is to have a high ISO rating. That's the sensitivity of your camera's sensor to the light. So obviously that means that you can be exposing for less time. Speaking of time, finally, you're probably going to want a long exposure. That we're talking probably 15 seconds, 30 seconds, maybe even longer. But that depends. There's going to be a lot of fiddling around, bit of trial and error, but let's take it a step at a time. Okay, so let's talk gear. I brought a few different things that we're going to try out because I actually want to show you that although good gear is obviously going to make life easier, it's not the end of the world if you haven't spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on your camera and lenses. So first up is my tripod. You can spend as much money or as little money as you want on it. They come in so many brands, so many materials, but the main thing is that you want it to be at least somewhat sturdy. It's a little windy up here today, and I don't think it's going to calm down very much. So I've got a Mi Photo Q1, but it really doesn't matter what you have. For my main camera is my trusty old Sony A7 Mark II. I've had it a bit over a year. got it second hand, but I'm very, very happy with it. Attached to it is my preferred astrophotography lens. It's the Samyang 14mm f2.8, and it's completely manual. It's got a manual aperture selecting ring, it's got a manual focus ring, nothing else. And because of that, it's really, really cheap. You can pick them up for like 500 Australian new, and it does a really, really good job for astro. One thing I find really cool about this is, check out this front element. That's a huge amount of glass. They always look really cool. It does mean that you can't put standard filter threads on the front, which is a little annoying, but never mind. Alright, so that's my main thing. I said I wanted to show you that top tier gear is not necessary, so I brought with me my old original Canon EOS M. It's I think 5 years old now, but I got it because it's really compact, and I think that even though it's quite old, it should be able to produce a fairly decent astrophotography Milky Way shot. I loaned it to a friend last year when we went to go get the Aurora in Tasmania, and she got some great shots with it. The lens on it is the 11-22. I should know what its aperture number is, but it doesn't seem to have it. Let's check the front. f4 to 5.6. So it's definitely slower than that f2.8 lens, but despite that, I think we can still pull something off if we know what we're doing. And finally, we have here the Sony RX100. It's a little compact. It's obviously a pretty good piece of gear. They're not cheap, but this is the first generation. This is the Mark 1. It's got a fairly large sensor, and it's an equivalent of 24 to 70 mil, and f1.8 aperture at its widest. So that will probably get us something quite good. Oh, we're losing the sun. Let's get set up. I want to time lapse the sunset a little bit, and we'll come back and talk about the settings that we're going to use once we're all set up. So the sun is set and we're well into blue hour now, but it's still pretty bright. Obviously no stars, but that gives us a chance to talk about some other important things that you need to think about. First of all, we should know where the Milky Way is in the sky. If you're in a dark enough place, you should be able to pick it out. Once the lights have all gone out, you'll be able to see at least faintly the Milky Way. But one thing that really helps is actually you can use apps and other resources and books and websites to figure this out. So one app that I like to use is called Photo Pills. It's pretty expensive as far as apps go. I think it's about $15. Available both Android and iOS. It's got this nifty AR function where if you hold it up, it shows you what you would see through a camera at that moment if it was completely dark. So you can see I've already picked out that this is the Milky Way here, and I've already picked out an angle that would show the Milky Way somewhere up here. Another thing to consider is composition. Landscape photography is all about finding a pretty picture, a pretty photo in the landscape. In this case, because we're just learning, I just want to maximize the amount of sky in the frame. We're not going for anything fancy. We've got the horizon. We'll maximize. We'll use really wide lenses to get as much sky in our photo as possible, so we can get as much of the Milky Way into the shot. settings. Everybody wants to know how you set your camera up to do this shot. I did mention before that we want high ISO sensitivity, and we're going to have long exposures and wide open apertures, and that's because the stars are faint and we want to maximize the amount of light from the stars on our sensor to get a nice bright contrasty picture. Let's start with aperture. Aperture is very easy. You're going to want it as wide open as you can. If your lens is f1.8 maximum, go for 1.8. If it's 2.8, 2.8, whatever. If you don't have expensive gear, it's okay. Obviously 1.8 lenses are going to be better than f4 lenses, but don't stress it. There's other factors at play. Shutter speed is also important, right? So how long we've got the shutter open so that light is hitting that sensor. Generally we want it as long as possible, but there is a limitation. The stars move through the night sky. They actually rotate in a circle, and that's because as the world rotates, as the planet turns on its axis, it points in different directions. So it's not going to be looking at the same part of space at the beginning of the night as it is at the end of the night. Therefore, the Milky Way is going to rotate. Everything is going to move. That is going to be a problem because you're basically going to get motion blur. You're going to get streaks. We want to minimize this movement as much as possible. So I found that for my gear with the A7 II and the 14mm lens, I'm probably going to go for no more than 25 seconds. If I can get it shorter, I will. And of course, the way you get that shorter is to raise the ISO, to make the sensor more sensitive. But this becomes a bit of a trade-off because the higher the ISO, the more noise you're going to get, and sometimes the noise is going to look like stars, and sometimes it's just going to wash out the stars. So you want to, there's always going to be this trade-off between your ISO and your shutter speed. You will get a feel for it, and I would recommend overall that you start with, say, ISO 1600 or 3200 with your widest open aperture and a shutter speed of 15 or 20 seconds. Start with that, take a shot, figure it out. If it's too streaky, then reduce the shutter speed and you might have to bump the ISO. If it's too bright, you might need to bring both of those down, and you've probably got some pretty good gear. So awesome. Like the lower the ISO and the shorter the shutter speed that you can get it, the better, but those values are going to be pretty high. Once things get dark enough out here, we'll go through that on my cameras and we'll see how we go. Alright, it's finally dark enough to start taking some shots. I'd probably like to wait another half hour, but we've got some cloud coming in which is totally going to ruin things if we don't move fast. So let's take you through the settings. We'll take a shot, try a few things and see how we go. Okay, alright, so here we are with the A7 II and the Samyang 14mm f2.8. Let's try to get in. Ooh, it's hard with all this lighting. Alright, let's have a look here. So what I want to do is make sure that we're all set correctly here. That aperturing is totally in the wrong place. We want it as wide open as possible. So now it's on 2.8. And then for focus, we're also doing manual focus. So what we want is, we're effectively shooting at the horizon or further away in this case. So we want to focus for infinity. So there's the infinity symbol there. Can we see it? And we want to line up with the marker there. Okay, so that's easy. Focus in infinity, make sure you're on f2.8 or the widest setting that your that your camera will allow. Next up is making sure that we've got the right exposure setting. So here I've set, before I mentioned we'd try 15 seconds with ISO 3200 as our first try, and then we'd experiment from there. So let's do that. I'm gonna put this torch away and we'll take it from there. Here we go. Oh, that's a lot of cloud. Let's Bring that back up. Alright, so actually this is pretty good, but we're going to have to move quickly with the other shots. We can see there's definitely some good Milky Way there, and obviously a lot of cloud on this side. Maybe if we want, we can try to take the ISO down just a little bit, if I remember how to use my camera. There we go, down to 1600. And let's see. Okay, there's another good one. Alright, so we're going to put you down and get the EOSM set up. That cloud problem had me pretty discouraged, and I sort of, I took the photos I could and I bailed. And I went to grab some dinner and eating some of the local fish and chips. Check out Skipper's at Umina. Fantastic fish, and the chips are to die for. Hand cut, apparently since the 60s. It's a great local joint. If you're ever in Umina or the area around it, check it out. Not sponsored. Anyway, so I was eating just in the parking lot back there, sort of overlooking the beach, Umina Beach, and it kind of looked like the sky had cleared up. So I figured it was worth at least coming out, getting down to the beach where none of this light could interfere, and take some more photos, give it another try. So I'm just going to grab the stuff, no more B-roll, we'll just go down, take the shots and see how they turn out. Okay, so here we are in the second location. Hopefully we'll have better luck with the clouds right now. So back on the A7 II, same settings as before, with the 14mm f2.8. We're going to start with 15 seconds at ISO 3200 and see what happens. So, like as you can see, the Milky Way is quite clear here, and I think this is an okay shot. Obviously, this is my best gear, so things are coming out pretty great. Let's see how we go with one of the other cameras. Here's our next camera. It's the Sony RX100. So it's got a smaller sensor than the A7, but it does go up to f1.8, and the lens is slightly different. So we're going to try that again with the f1.8, 15 seconds, ISO 3200. Let's see how we go. Okay, so yeah, we can see the Milky Way fairly clearly there as well. Alright, I'm actually pretty happy with that. I don't think we're going to need to play around with the settings too much. I am shooting in RAW, so that gives us a lot of leeway to handle these in post. Okay, here we are with the final camera. This is the Canon EOS M Mark I. Nothing, it was the original version. It's got the EFM mount lens, the 11-22, and it's, I think, at f4 at the moment. Once again, 15 seconds with ISO 3200, and let's see how we go. Okay. The buttons are in all different places. Let's have a look. That's pretty good. Definite Milky Way there. Tree's a little blown out, but that's fine. That's not what we're here for. So I think we're doing okay. Well, we got the shots. Looks like all three cameras did pretty well. Even the 5-year-old EOS M with its fairly slow f4 lens, they came out. That looks like it came out pretty good. I just want to point out that when I started shooting the Milky Way, I was, I think, on an old Nikon D7000. I was using kit lenses at the time, and I was like, obviously things are better, but the photos that I got were pretty good, and they inspired me to keep on trying and experimenting. And trying and experimenting is, I think, really important when you're doing photography. You can watch all the videos you want and read all the articles, but ultimately nothing beats getting out there and doing it. So I hope this was useful for you. Make sure that you go out, grab your gear, get out and take some photos, make some plans. Make sure you subscribe so that when I release part 2, in which we will do some Lightroom edits on these RAWs, that you're ready to edit along with me. So thanks again, and I will catch you next time.